everybody, to another episode of Spawn Plays. This is episode 2. I'm super excited to be rocking with all of you, and I am very, very excited because one of my favorite games of the year, I'm going to get a chance to talk to one of the folks behind that game, David Fenn, designer and composer from Acid Nerve on Death's Door. Thank you so much for being here. I am very excited to have you on the show today.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh my goodness. So I am probably one of your biggest fans right now because this game is nuts. This game is wild in what you've been able to accomplish with such a small team and with a squad where they're games that kind of feel like they come out of nowhere. But they're attached to folks that I know put out nothing but great games. So like knowing that you have all been connected to this fantastic publisher and knowing that this game is going to be coming out and knowing not where it's going to land, how has the reception been to Death's Door from the community that you've seen? What's the conversation you're all having back at the office?
It has been absolutely wild. Like, we did not expect it to go this well from a critical or commercial success standpoint. Like, obviously we love this game. We've been working on it for 3.5 years. We announced it quite late into development, and it felt like for the first 2.5 years or so, we were just making a game for ourselves, like a game that we loved as a team. And then it just became a reality, actually showing it to people. And so we announced the game earlier this year. People seemed to dig the announcement itself, and we thought, okay, this is looking good. People seem keen. And then, the reception has been just exceeded any of our expectations. It's been, just an amazing time.
So, crows. Let's get into crows. Where did this concept come to pass where this was going to be the main protagonist for your game?
That's a question that we get a lot, and honestly the answer is just a bit of a weird one because none of us on the team can remember when we first had the idea of the protagonist is a crow. All I can say is, like, we were prototyping a game called Death's Door years ago, and it didn't star crows, but it did have these themes that Death's Door has today of these people who are trying to avoid death and like how that affects their personalities and the impact they have on the world. And we have this theme of doors as well, like connecting the story together. And we basically, at some point, one of our prototypes had a crow with a sword, and it felt really good to play. And that gave us this idea of like Reaper crows, gave us a new layer to the story and a new perspective to all of the themes that we wanted to explore in a way where it really nailed the tone of the game, because we want this game to be something which can explore kind of dark and sinister themes, but from an angle where there's some kind of humor and some cuteness and positivity. And so having like an animal protagonist always makes things a little bit more approachable in that way. So crows just became the perfect star of the game, I think.
It's interesting too that you say that, and I'm happy that you did, because you first, when you're like come to the game, I remember seeing it in previews and seeing kind of initial information that got put out into the world about the game, and I was like, oh, this is going to be really cute. This is going to be great. I'm expecting to have all of this kind of whimsy alongside the game, and it has whimsy in it, but it knocks out this really interesting tone where not only the tone of the story, which I think is brilliant and fantastic. Your team has done a really good job of bringing this idea and this story of what these crows are supposed to be doing, and I'll ask you exactly what the kind of main through line is, but I think you've nailed the ability to balance that out in a way that I think was really surprising, and it was actually the reason why I like it so much, is that it didn't just do that one thing. Give the folks at home a little bit of information about exactly what the kind of main story plot is trying to kind of get around, without, of course, giving spoilers.
Yeah, sure. So the basic premise of the game, for anyone who doesn't know already, is that it's set in a world where nothing dies naturally anymore. And a group of crows working in this kind of bureaucratic office are in charge of maintaining some sense of order. And one of the first events of the game is that you have this assignment to get a giant soul that gets stolen from you, and you have to track someone down to get it. And then basically we unravel the story from there, and you end up in a world where even the crows themselves haven't had access to. So everyone there has lived far beyond their years and kind of all become corrupted and malevolent beings due to this process that's happened to this world.
It's really wild to see how a story like that you shared, that most people would think of kind of having this very brooding tone and this very kind of like, a kind of like deep down and messy kind of feel. You've been able to bring some lightness to it, not only with the characters that you have, but this game is funny. Like, I love the crows in the office. The crows we kind of start in the beginning of the game is in this kind of, bleak office that feels very much like Joe versus the volcano, with the kind of sedentary crows just hanging out in that space. How important was it to bring that layer of the gameplay into the game itself, of making sure that humor was also a part of this game?
Yeah, I think that is something that kind of became a part of it organically as we were developing the game. I think the first prototypes we made were, like you were saying, a little bit just purely morbid. And then I think it's just kind of part of how we make games as a team. We take inspiration from everything we love and we make the game as we want it to be. And I think naturally we enjoy things with that humor and positivity. And I think there's also a bit of a British humor element to it, of making jokes out of a morbid situation. But looking back on it, I would say that that kind of contrast is one of my favorite things about the world that we've created. It's one of the things that I really think we nailed in the game. And it's something where, looking forwards to whatever I would work on next, I feel like it's going to be so hard to match that perfect contrast in the world building between light and dark and funny and serious.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I've come to love, besides the just like straight gameplay being pretty flawless, like I think a game like this is usually a trade-off sometimes, when, especially for teams that are as small as yours. There's like less than 20 people in your team, correct?
Yeah, so it's kind of 5 people. Acid Nerve is 2 people, myself and Mark Foster, and we normally collaborate with artists. So for this game, we brought on a couple of concept artists and a modeler.
That's wild.
And then a few other bits of help elsewhere.
What? Like, that's nuts to know that this team is so small, who put out, I would say, to be fair, like one of my Game of the Year nominees already. Like, I think the angle that you've all kind of tackled in this game from a movement standpoint and from a story standpoint, and you as a composer on the game, with some of the most beautiful, gorgeous music that I've seen in a game or heard in a game in a long time. How was it, adding that layer to it as well? Because I think you've nailed tone with the music that you put into the game as well.
That's good to know. Yeah, we actually, from one of the very first prototypes that we ever did, what we originally pitched to Devolver when we wanted to start developing the game, we had fully developed music in that prototype, and we think really early on we nailed the mood that we were going for, and a lot of the tunes from that prototype are still kind of present in the game today, and that mood still runs through it. So I think one of the things that helps on that front is having had music in the game from so early on. It's always been such a core part of it, because it can be hard jumping into a project as a composer as it's late on. It can be hard to find that mood that melds with the rest of the game. But for us, we had our concept artist, when he was designing areas and drawing all the environments of the game, he was able to listen to music for inspiration on his end, and then we'd be able to, like, every member of the team is able to kind of cyclically feed into each other's work in that way. So I definitely think that helps.
Is that the way that kind of works between a team, especially with a team as small as this is? Like, you're starting from the prototype space and phase of the game where you're like, all right, we have this idea of what this thing could potentially be, and then you're ping-ponging ideas off each other and trying to figure out next ways to kind of iterate towards the next thing. When was the moment where the team was like, oh shit, I think we have something special here?
I think the true moment of that was probably when the game came out and everyone said how much they loved it. That was the first time I was like, oh wow, maybe we actually did it. Maybe we made a brilliant game. I don't know. But yeah, you're exactly right in terms of that being the process. And I do think that we did a good job as a team of making it very collaborative and having trust in every member of the team to bring their own ideas to the table, and every member of the team having enthusiasm for everyone else's ideas. We actually managed to incorporate like a really high percent of all of the amount of ideas that every team member had in terms of character designs and concepts and stuff like that. So I think development was very like natural and organic for that reason.
Yeah. I'm always really interested to hear about the conversations that happened in the kind of publisher space. So like a team comes together, they build a game, they understand what they want it to be, they kind of know where they want it to land, and then they start to shop it to other publishers. Was it a thing were you looking to go to Devolver and say, hey, here's the thing that I know you understand a game like this? Because personally, I just believe there are like 2 or 3 pubs that when they put out a game, my expectations for that game go up a bunch. And knowing that this was tied to Devolver, that automatically did that for me. What was the conversation of kind of giving this game to them and saying, we want to partner in this with you from the team?
Yeah, so we were kind of lucky in that regard because we've worked with Devolver before on our last game, Titan Souls.
Oh, yes.
So, and like, I feel like you're right. I think every developer wants to work with Devolver for sure. Like, they're one of the best publishers, and we had such a fun time with them on Titan Souls. So for us, we'd obviously had a little bit of a break. We both went and did our own thing for a couple of years before we really found the kind of inspiration and passion for Death's Door. And the first step, like you said, we created our prototype. We put all this effort into this fancy pitch, and because we were feeling nervous, like we weren't sure because it had been so long if Devolver was still going to be interested in working with us on the next game. So yeah, we nervously sent over this pitch. We sent a demo, gameplay video. We made our own little trailer and just a document, and kind of just waited for a response. And then one of the guys at Devolver just sent us a GIF of this guy just rolling around in a pile of money. So we were just thinking, does that mean they like it? I don't. Have we got
it? Now I know that's the way the Devolver communicates with this development community is through.
Yeah, that was a very classic Devolver move.
Oh, I mean, I love them so much. It's great. The best part about this series is this ride along series is now we get a chance to actually play the game. And you get to critique me on how badly I play your game. No, I'm just playing. But you do get to tell me, like, what am I doing wrong and what is the conversation? But I do want to say for everybody who's watching this right now, I am much further along in the game. I'm almost basically at or towards the end of the game. So there may be spoilers. I'll try not to go into anything. I'm not going to go do the last boss battle while we do the show. But just know that for your information that there may be some spoilers ahead if you have not played the game. So don't get mad at me and don't beat me up. So don't do that because that'll be mean. But I'm excited to jump into some Death's Door. So one of the things that I love about what you've done, and this feels like the year of the isometric game. And I love that this art style and this kind of format has come back. What was the conversation when, because it feels like all those games have kind of landed right now at this point in this year. Yeah. What was the conversation around, going isometric with this game and having that be the point of view that you were going to have while playing Death's Door?
Interestingly, we've always been on isometric for this game. We kind of just locked that in really early on. We knew we wanted to expand to 3D instead of pixel art, so we wanted to figure that out. But we like the kind of top-down view. It's a good way of having very clean, intuitive gameplay, and it's easy to make that more polished as a small team as well. And I think we did experiment with having it kind of more face on rather than the classic 45-degree tilt, but it just felt more different to our last game, Titan Souls, and just a bit more like luxurious having this kind of view. It helps with the diorama sort of look of the game. But being 3D as well does mean that we can occasionally move the camera as well, as you've no doubt seen on your playthrough. So that's been a nice little extra touch to the isometric vibe.
I love, because you do wind up getting this really interesting kind of tilt shift that you wind up getting, which I think is really beautiful. And I just love the small details for things like this, like, you know, being able to chop at things so that you get your magic power back. We saw a little bit earlier when you plant seeds, the kind of seedlings come around and follow you. Is there lore behind that too? Is that a thing? Like, is there a, because I feel like the enemies, they are there, but, and maybe I might have missed it during my gameplay, but I don't remember there being like specific things of like, why is this monster here? Why are those things there in that particular part of it? Are they all just lost souls?
Yeah, I think like the general enemies are just the idea of these beings that should have died but haven't. So they've just become corrupted, and that's kind of the extent of the lore behind the fodder enemies. But then obviously any mini bosses and main bosses, they all have proper lore and backstories, and you know, they've all made an impact on this world. As for the forest spirits, I think it's something that we always wanted to include in the game, just as like a fun little touch. And we eventually pitched the idea to one of our artists who came up with this really cool design for them. And we just thought, yeah, this has to go in. And they certainly do tie into the lore of the world. So they kind of directly relate to the first boss that you fight in the prologue. They're basically that boss's children, and then the way that they affect the world is kind of it runs alongside our story and enhances one of the themes that we want to develop as the game takes its course.
I love, and it's so like this little thing following me is so damn cute. I love the fact that it lights up. Again, it's like so many things kind of like talk to each other in this interesting visual language that you've made. What was the hardest part about kind of getting the combat right? Because I felt like the thing that you usually wind up having in a game like this where it feels off is that there's a small disconnect between the actions that you want to do on screen and what winds up happening in the input. How'd you make sure you got all that stuff super tight?
I think like coming from pixel art background, I do find that you generally tends to get more responsive and tighter controls with a pixel art game than you do with 3D, just because of the way that 3D animation works and the way that moves will often tween into, like, animations like tween through. So basically they smoothly glide into a motion instead of the really instant slash that you normally get in a pixel art game. So we put a lot of work early on into getting these controls feeling like they are as responsive as they would be in that kind of retro game, because that's a big part of it for us. And then there was a lot of iteration in terms of the feeling of impact as well, to, like you were saying, give you that feeling where everything's properly connected. Because originally, when you slash near an enemy, then all on one frame, then you would see the slash, you would see the enemy take damage and the enemy flash and the enemy get knocked back. And we were like, well, one frame, that's great. That's what you want, isn't it? That's as fast as possible. But we realized that just adding like an extra frame or maybe 2 frames from the slash to the moment where there's like a big on-screen VFX like slash effect, and then the enemy flashing after that and getting knocked back, that's what made it feel like a connection rather than just like, you know, you're pressing a button and things are happening. So it was just, a lot of like, I think a lot of polish and a lot of gradual iteration with a lot of thought is basically how we achieve that feeling, I think.
It's so funny to hear you talk about it in those terms, because it feels like you're making a fighting game, which is awesome too. Because I feel like there's a connection there between that the way that those kinds of genres work to make it feel like the impact is important and is hitting the way that it needs to hit, which I think is really interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah. One of the other things I love about this game is, and I'm not going to go into spoilers, but I think the way you've done Easter eggs and secrets has been really brilliant too. So I didn't know that you could go down into these sewers if I could do that right. But it's awesome the way that that's been a thing. Oh, as soon as I say that, I can't do it. But you can go in those sewers and fly around and kind of roll around in between it to find special things. How important was it to kind of continue to do that as a through line too within the game of having those secrets kind of be things that you want the players to find and reveal?
Yeah, so in terms of mechanics like the sewer, I wouldn't say that was like an essential part of the game in itself, but one of the approaches to design we had was if we have an idea like that and, we might have a schedule that week, but if you think, okay, if we spend a day, we can make this extra little touch to the game. The sewers was an example of that, and it just makes the world feel a bit more like there's more to it. There's more surprises for the player because we don't actually ever tell you that you can go through those sewers. And that's kind of a deliberate thing where we want players to think, play half of the game and then suddenly accidentally do it and think, oh, what? I could go in all of those sewers. And now I realize I could have done that from the start of the game and I can go and get a bunch of extra secrets. So I think just because we've played games where we've enjoyed that kind of feeling before, that was the kind of thing that we wanted to go for. And then in terms of the secrets themselves, we always wanted to dedicate a lot of time to fleshing out the world with these almost like multi-layered explorational elements to get all of the secrets in the game, in terms of collectibles and 100% in the game, thoroughly exploring all the areas. And then I think other than that, I would just say that adding secrets to the game is the most fun part for developers. So while we're often thinking of the player and the audience when we make the main story and what's going to make the player the most happy, when we're adding secrets, it's often what do we want to add to the game? Because this stuff is optional. So this is our chance to make what we are so excited and passionate about. So I feel like that's why the secret stuff, it's kind of for us, but it's also for the people who love the game the most.
I'd love to hear that because that's the things that I wonder about when I'm going back through. Because now I'm kind of on that part of my run where I'm about to hit the end of it. I'm trying to not end it because I'm trying to pull in all the goodies just to kind of wrap up the whole experience. And to hear that that's a part of, the fun of making a game like this for you all as the developers really is pretty awesome because I think a lot of times people think about that part of the development process as devs had to put this in to kind of lengthen the time for their game. But hearing that it's again, a thing that you wanted to do because it's just a thing you wanted to do and you loved that part of it is also a fantastic part of just the way that I feel like you've all come to making this game and sharing it with the community. So that's pretty awesome to hear for sure. I love hearing stuff like that. That's great.
Cool.
One of the things I thought was pretty brilliant is just besides level design and the way that the biomes kind of change throughout your gameplay, was this game has some of the most fun bosses I've played in a game in a long time. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you went into boss design because each one of them feels very, very unique. The details and designs on all of them is gorgeous. And it never felt while I was playing that anything felt abusively hard. Everything felt at a really nice level of difficulty. I'd love to hear your thoughts about design and difficulty in that way.
Yeah, for sure. I think boss fights for us are our background as a team. Our first major game was Titan Souls, and that was a game that was just bosses. Yeah. And that was a very minimal game with a lot of restrictions where we were forced to kind of we had to try and make every boss different to the last because that's all there was in the game. And we also had to try and make bosses behave in different and interesting ways because of this whole gimmick in Titan Souls. Every boss only took one hit. So I think we realized as a team that was so enjoyable to us, and we had the potential to kind of channel all that experience. We probably have more experience making bosses from making Titan Souls than many teams would from making several games. So we wanted to channel that everything we'd learn. So yeah, it was kind of a natural starting point for Death's Door. We knew that's something that we wanted. And then in terms of difficulty, that is an iterative process. I think oftentimes then you will as game developers, the first version of something is always just way too hard. It's just always the way it is because you've played your game so much. You're better at it than any of your players will be, other than maybe like speedrunners when they've put in a few hundred hours. So yeah, like you kind of have to. Normally, Mark will, make the first prototype, send it to me. I'll like immediately think, oh, what are you doing with this? This is impossible. This is ridiculous. Change this. Like, I'm personally offended at how hard this is. So we'll do a pass like that. And then we did a fair amount of play testing and focus testing for the game as well, where one of the things we wanted to know was how many deaths were you taking on each of the bosses? Because we want this game to feel intense. We want you to feel like you are being challenged, but we don't want it to be one of those where it's just like you feel like you're just bashing your head against the wall because it's impossible. So it's ideal for us for you to, you might die the first time you try and fight a boss and think, wow, this is going to be hard. But then as soon as you adapt your play and really, give it a few goes and put the effort in, most players will probably manage to do it without it being like as hard as those infamous, like very, very difficult games. And I think another thing for us with difficulty was we put a few different things into the world itself. We don't actually have any difficulty options in the game, but the way that we see it is that you, if you ever get stuck, then there's always more to find in the world. And as you can see there, there's always soul pickups, which you can use to level up your character. So if you do hit a really hard boss, then you can maybe just take a break, go exploring for a bit, level up a few stats, and then that would put you in a better situation for it. And then on the other side of that, for people who want a harder game, then you can just try and get the Umbrella achievement, where you only use the Umbrella as your main weapon for the whole game, which is just like a kind of joke weapon which does half the damage of any of the other weapons. So yeah, that our approach to difficulty was to kind of integrate it into the world like that.
I like that, because I did think about doing that, and then I was like, oh hell no, I want to beat the game. I might go back through it and do it though, because again, I'm a person who likes to kind of test fate and do stuff in that way. Did you have any favorite characters to design? I know Grandma for me is one of my favorite characters in the game. What was the conversations about, like how you wanted to kind of build out the world in that way? Did you find that there were, you talked a little bit about lore and having them kind of, work themselves into the story. Did you have any specific ones that you found that were even super fun to kind of just write and make?
I think all of the bosses are different approaches on how this world can kind of make someone go a bit wrong. But then the NPCs, like the friendly NPCs, they are like, we wanted to have this vibe of characters just making their way in a bleak world, but not necessarily like a desperate struggle or like a really dark and depressing situation. We kind of like this the vibe of meeting characters and they're kind of just friendly and maybe a bit nonchalant and just kind of, it has that surreal element to it. I think my favorite is probably Jefferson, who you might have met by this point in the game.
Yes.
The definitely a professional chef fisherman who isn't at all being controlled by the squid latching onto his back. But I just really like him. Like his line, like I didn't do any of the writing in the game. That was all by Mark Foster, the other core Acid Nerve team member. So I'm allowed to say that the lines in the game just really crack me up. I find it hilarious. So yeah, everything Jefferson says, I just think is amazing.
It was really good. Like, even the, kind of small anecdotal things about, the way we think about death and the way we think about the kind of cycle and circle of life, I thought were pretty profound in a really interesting way that you don't really see in games anymore. They do it, but they do it in a kind of ham-fisted, heavy-handed way. And I love the way that the writing came across in that respect of not kind of needing to be, your super deep moment to be able to have that same feeling come across, which I think they landed that fairly well. We're almost at the end of our run. The thing I will ask is, the reception has been fantastic. I'm sure that this game is going to be in the contendership for Game of the Year. Just seeing how many folks have been talking about it, can nod and wink at me. Are you thinking about doing any more content for this game, or is this it for what we can expect from the Death's Door space for now?
I think slightly boring answer, but we have no idea what's next for us. We're currently just fixing a bunch of the classic compatibility issues and stuff like that you always get around a game launch. So we've got a few patches going up that are just fixes along those lines. And then I think once they're all done, it's probably time for us to have a little holiday. But if any people who love the game want to tell us what you want to see from us next, then feel free. We're all ears, because we need to kind of have a little sit and think about what's next for us, I think.
I totally reasonable answer. I think you've busted your asses for so long putting this game out into the world that you should take a damn break. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm happy that you'll be able to do so and do that. I absolutely adore this game. This was one of my best and favorite surprises of 2021. I think this is a game that, when I think about this genre of game and the combination of art and music and gameplay, like, you seriously knocked this out of the park in a way that has been pretty fantastic to see. So kudos to you and the rest of the Acid Nerve team for bringing something that I would definitely put the moniker of classic on it. So thank you and the rest of the team
thanks very much
for the work that you've done on Death's Door. It has been amazingly cool to run through and play, and hopefully by the end of this day I would have beaten that damn boss. It's a pain in the butt, but he's good. It's a very good boss battle. David, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us on our second episode of Spawn Plays. Again, we hope to be doing more of these across so many other of our dev and pub friends, bringing them on to kind of have a little bit of light shed on the development process and the ideas behind the games that we're playing while playing them. So, David, thank you again for being with us, and everybody at home, we'll see you all for episode 3. I'm not sure who that's going to be yet, so we'll be poking around to see who we can snag to come on and hang out with us. But thank you so much for the reception of episode 1. We've really enjoyed it, and we'll see you all very, very soon. Much love and peace.